Welcome back to the Nautical Chronicle. It's been a few months since I wrapped up was it round 4? No, round 3 of my live stream show, the Nautical Chronicle. It's um it's been quite a it's been quite a fun time kind of just getting back into the hang of regular live streams. It's of course a nightmare, like a logistical nightmare, like wrangling guests and trying to uh, coordinate guests, prepare for topics, and actually, in the whole time, get some kind of work done on all of my model ships. And right now, for this live stream, I've started with, well, this is going to be episode 1, but I've been working on a new model ship, and I'll get into the future of this channel and exactly how I came to actually working on this battleship in a second. But just as a little preface, one of the reasons why I started this channel was to promote the historic preservation of various museum ships around America. In the bottom left is the USS Niagara, located up at. It used to be in Erie, Pennsylvania, but now it's in, I think, Maine for repairs. And the bottom right is the USS Olympia, the U.S. Navy's flagship in the Pacific Fleet during the Spanish-American War. Now, the USS Olympia is something of what do you say? It's something of a it's it's one of the very few remaining pre-dreadnought battleship sort of type. I know it's not a battleship; it's a cruiser, but it's it's quite beautiful and it's very old. It's in constant need of repairs due to its age. So whenever you know, I've had something of an inspiration, something of a real motivation to actually build something of a model of this USS Olympia at some point in the future. Probably not like not soon, but maybe next year. And I came across a particularly amazing uh, model kit. It's an Encore kit. Um, Originally, I was building like people watching, my regular YouTube channel show might notice that I actually started working on the whole of the USS Olympia not too long ago uh, for a few of these episodes, but I came across a better kit of it that had little brass photo etch pieces and brass cannons and a really nice base plate, and I really couldn't resist. So yeah, that's some of my motivation for actually building the Olympia, but I won't get to it for a long time. Uh, as sort of practice, I started. Well, well, maybe I shouldn't say I started, but I came across a kit for. I'll see. I'll just pull it up. Uh, I've had a sort of fascination with the U.S. or the Russian battleship Tsesarevich for a while. Way back in January of this year, I put out on Twitter like, "Hey, should I build the Variag Aurora or the Tsesarevich?" And I don't think people said Tsesarevich, yeah, people agreed. It's it's ugly, it's steampunk, it's a nightmare design, but um, it's somewhat endearing, I guess. Which is why, you know, before getting into building the USS um, Olympia, might as well get a little bit of practice in with the Tsarevich. Like, I've never actually worked with photo etch, and if you guys don't know what photo etch is, it's just a very, very thin plate of sheet metal that you have to use extra tiny tweezers um, to actually make tiny details that injection mold pieces couldn't actually make themselves. Yeah. So, like I said earlier, it's painted black. It looks like a bathtub. Very old, very rusty, very Russian, and it's. I'll get to actually building it in a little while after a few more people file into the live stream. But this was the Russian flagship at Port Arthur at the start of the Russo-Japanese War way back in 1904. It was probably Russia's most powerful warship at the time. Japan, of course, they pulled a little bit of a Pearl Harbor and launched a surprise missile attack on Port Arthur at night. You know, history kind of repeats itself, but then after repairing a little bit, it engaged in probably the biggest um, naval battle between pre-dreadnought battleships in history before the dreadnought and more modern battleships came along. Um, at a certain point, uh, probably some point in the next few weeks, like I started drafting it, but I might have something like geopolitics of the Russo-Japanese War show at some point in the next month or so. Kind of the same way that I had a sort of Canva map autism show with Will Tanner a few months ago. It's it's actually quite a lot of fun actually looking into where certain things were at what time, and I guess getting into some of the counter historical, what could have happened during this war, why is it important, yada yada yada. I I'll like I said, I'm still working on guests right now for the next round of interviews, and hopefully I should get you guys the final list for the final round of guests for the next round of guests at some point next week. Hopefully, um, for Saturday, I'm going to host a call-in show. I'm going to have the link to this StreamYard studio up for anyone in the chat or for anyone on Twitter to join. So it'll be, well, first off, it's an experiment to see what kind of audience I have. Second off, um, I was going to invite some of my little friends on as well, just to get the conversation started. But um, it should be a fairly relaxing, nice Saturday morning show, and I hope all of you guys will enjoy it because I mean. I think I've said it a few times throughout the show. The whole point of this show has always been, hey, I've got a full closet worth of model ships, and I have all these internet friends and a YouTube channel, and I want to actually both share what I actually love, hang out with some of my friends that I've met over the years. I'm so gracious to have accumulated such a nice little network of friends, and you guys have gotten me through a lot over the years, and this is just getting back into that old habit of building up a sort of parasocial, mutually beneficial relationship, and hearing what all of you guys have to say. Um, but like I said, motive number one: share some of my ship autism with you guys. And the Tsesarevich that I'm working on right now is a monster for a few different reasons. Um, if you guys probably don't know much about, because fluid mechanics, fluid dynamics. But for ships, usually you want to have what's called a little bit of a tumble home design rather than flare. Um, it has to do with stability and how tall you can actually make your ship. Um, yeah, this one over here is like the HMS Victory. Right around the waterline, it starts bending inwards, and um, at the later end of the 1800s, the French battleship engineers came up with this crackpot idea. Hey, why don't we just try to just bring about tumble home design to its logical conclusion? Because the more bowed out it is, the wider it is at the bottom, you can compensate by building higher. And the higher you have your cannons, the farther they can shoot. So what you end up with is uh, essentially battleships that look like bathtubs. I'll just pull it back up. Yeah. So right here, ugly gray tumble or ugly like gray painted, black painted, like steampunk floating bathtub. Um, there were issues with the stability of this because even if you do compensate by making the bottom of the hole wider to make sure that it's stable enough to have cans farther, like a little bit higher, um, it's still not as stable. It's definitely buoyant, but it's not necessarily stable. These are sort of separate calculations. It'll float, but it might tip over. Um, so you can actually probably see this on. Shoot, you can probably see this just on camera. The way that this hole looks with. Oh, let's bring this over here. Yeah, it slopes very steeply on the sides so that it can compensate for a little bit higher of a superstructure. Now, for this particular kit, I spared no expense. No, before I get into the actual model, um, 8 o'clock tonight, tune into Old Glory Club's Pony Express Radio. We are very blessed to have, I believe it's Harvey Wallbanger of the Virginia chapter, well, the 3 Virginia chapters of OGC as guests. Um, they're to promote the upcoming East Coast Forum conference that is going to happen this weekend. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to make it, but have a great time if you can. And tune into Pony Express Radio right afterwards. Um, and further shilling for Pony Express or for OGC, um, I represent I'm something of a coordinator for OGC for the various Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Ohio chapters. Um, so if you're interested in getting involved with the OGC, I linked the OGC chapters link. It should be scrolling by as I speak right now. Um, but 3 Pennsylvania chapters: the Order of Aquafillers, Maker Creek Society, Delaware Crossing Society. If you get involved, I'll probably help you get your start as a member myself. So hit up those links, check out Pony Express Radio afterwards, and well, let's get into building um, the actual battleship Tsesarevich. Um, so I there's a lot here. Uh, Trumpeter is a nightmare of a model ship company. It's I believe it's a Chinese brand, but their issue is that they always have like a billion parts, and instead of consolidating parts, um, they always just make tiny parts that are like a fourth of the size of a grain of rice. And this is pretty annoying for a few different reasons. Um, I need to use tiny tweezers to actually like I can barely pick up. I don't think the camera is even able to like pick up this tiny piece. But this is just a little pop gun. Um, and when you're actually attaching the tiny little pop guns to the actual hull, you need to use this sort of plastic cement. And the issue with plastic cement is that it um, essentially melts the plastic into itself. Um, so you end up kind of melting some of the pieces, and the pieces are already so tiny that it doesn't look great at the very end. But this is the upper end of the sort of difficulty curve, and it's a nightmare. But it's also going to look amazing at the final end because I spared no expense. Picked up some little facade, like little wooden deck facades. Um, like rather than having sprayed the ship's deck tan, you can just put like a little thin strip, thin sort of sticker. It's not a sticker, but it's actual wood that sticks to the deck and looks a billion times better than something that's painted, unless you're like an absolute autist and you cut out little tiny strips of tape and do various coats with thousands of strips of it's these little facades are just about as good as you can get for actually putting this stuff together, for making a convincing deck. Let's see what I can actually do with the stream going. Um, let's see. All right, H pieces. So I have to apologize to the chat a little bit for yes neglecting my responsibilities as live streamer. Well, first for the last few months of not being particularly active. Um, very very busy in my personal life. Second off, um, it's like I said earlier, it's very difficult to coordinate guests, um, especially especially on a shorter times time scale. And third off, there's you know, there's a certain being a streamer takes a little bit of, I guess it takes a certain amount of habit for you have to have the habit of doing it. You have to have the gift of gab, and both the gift of gab and the time and the willingness to put yourself out there, and that's takes. I'm more sort of, I guess, just a guy who happened upon it, and I don't know. I'm just starting to ramble at this point. Um, in terms of yes, overall stuff going on, overall online sphere stuff. Um, we've all been enjoying the bullying of Will Stancil. We've all been enjoying, you know, Department of Homeland Security on Twitter being rambunctious. Um, I've I've always been trying. Well, over the last year, I've been trying to become less overtly political on my on my what was it? It's I've been trying to be less political on Twitter, just because Twitter is becoming increasingly brain rotted. Um, but old habits die hard, I guess. And well, we'll see my my channel get a little bit, or my Twitter get a little bit less partisan. Hopefully, over the next few months, as these streams start coming out. By the way, whatever you do, this is a very bad habit. Um, this is a very bad habit I have. Um, do not uh, do not shave off pieces of excess plastic with a knife. That's a very bad idea. I end up getting all sorts of cuts on my hands. But it's the sort of quick and dirty way of cleaning these up. I used to use my pocket knife, or Swiss Army knife, but I'm a professional. Let's see. So let's see what we have going on. So in terms of overall online stuff, oh, that reminds me. I over the last what is it? Over the last, I guess, 2 or 3 years, maybe 2 years. Um, I've put out, Jesus, it's got to be about 100 pages uh, worth of actual content on Substack. Now, Substack as a platform is, I mean, I think it's a little bit more forgiving than most um, when it comes to just dipping my feet into it. But the Old Glory Club, if you're ever interested, the Old Glory Club, if you send if you email them, a nice sort of anything, as long as it's America centric, Old Glory Club will usually post your Substack articles given time and a little bit of editing. Um, let's see how far back it goes. Right, I've produced quite a few sort of long form Substack articles, and I'm very proud of them. The L and the I on the sort of origins of the Illuminati, the Bavarian Illuminati, and then survival theories and popular misconceptions of what happened to the Illuminati. It's my sort of first long form content produced on Substack. Um, Looking back, I it could be a little bit neater, especially towards the end, but it's pretty fun. Um, I have actually returned to East Palestine after the the chemical spill and the train accident and chemical spill. It's Ohio is just about as what's a depressing area of Ohio. Um, but I'm pretty sure a lot of the sort of cancer, you know, the cancer causing chemicals were mostly just destroyed during the day, and all of the contaminated soil was already trucked out. So we'll 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 see in a few years if people ended up really did get it, like cancer, um, get contaminated cancer, whatever. Um, my 2 year long passionate history or passionate fascination with filibusters. So I wrote two very, very long articles, a general history of American land piracy and Knights of the Final Filibuster. Now, these two, I feel like Knights of the Final Filibuster is my final, or my sort of magnum opus. Um, I think it's definitely the most well written, and it's concise in a way that um, land piracy and the next article I mentioned isn't. Um, it's like people know of the Knights of the Golden Circle, but they don't know exactly what they did. Um, yeah, I was very glad to have been able to research the Knights of the Golden Circle and publish long form content on them. Um, this article on Mike Fink, King of the River, I believe it's paywalled by OGC, but I ended up getting a very nice gift from George Bagby. He gave me a copy of um, it's what is it called? It's half alligator, like half horse, half alligator. A 1950s like biography on Mike Fink, King of the River, but only after I wrote this sort of, I guess, a concise history of Mike Fink and coverage of the Mike Fink legend. um, I did. Let's see. So I've gone on to review two movies over the last year, or yeah, year or two. Death of Stalin and Africa Dio. Unfortunately, Africa Dio has a certain, I guess, reputation, and rightly so, for being so. It's very graphic, um, and it's a very impactful film. It's a very biased film, um, but it's an excellent watch. And then let's see, and then my latest Substack article, Death and Taxes. Now, Death and Taxes, I believe if you were to listen to it on audio form, it takes like several hours to listen to. It's basically a small book um, on what happened for the Whiskey Rebellion and who the original Mingo Creek Society were. Um, it's I would say that it gets a little bit. I'd say that it gets a little bit bloated, especially in the beginning, and it takes a little while to. Well, I think in my research of the Whiskey Rebellion, I end up having certain biases and sympathies, in actually researching in a fairly nonpartisan way. The primary sources of who said what, who did what, when, who said this, who said that, and in the sort of Federalist versus Democratic Republican tradition, I end up coming to sort of Mattersonian, sort of moderate Federalist position with no great um, w- with a lot of strings attached, because the thing about the Whiskey Rebellion that not many people properly appreciate is just how reliant just about how reliant people from Western Pennsylvania were on uh, whiskey production. Whiskey production um, was essentially the lifeblood of the Appalachians and America. After the American Revolution, we didn't have any treaties with Spain or France to use New Orleans as a trade port, so everything had to be carried over. All the products made in Appalachia had to be transported over the Appalachian mountains, and this was very costly. And the fact that the federal government put an excise tax on whiskey production essentially made the entire Appalachian region economically unviable. And and these people were very rebellious at the best of times. I was surprised by how is civilized a lot of the organizers of the Whiskey Rebellion were. Just about all of the revolutionary and seditious activity was highly. It was essentially cloaked in very lawyerly language, outside of just the brutes of the Mingo Creek Association, roughing up uh, tax collectors. I highly recommend these as a read. It was a pleasure to have had the inclination to actually research this topic. Just as a currently as a Pittsburgh Yinzer, it's it's a piece of history that no one ever. Well, people know that the Whiskey Rebellion happened, but um, they don't actually look into it. Um, I see in the I haven't been looking the comments much, but someone mentioned like what's at the bottom of the HMS what's at the bottom of the HMS Victory under the barrels. So um, it's called the ballast. So essentially, uh, I'll I'll pull it up. So for come on, come on. Okay, so for ships of sail, you have a few different decks. Um, you can see the two gun decks with cannons. Uh, you can see this sort of the bottom of the hull. It's full of like extra timbers in case like rigging or one of the masts needs to be replaced. But at the very bottom are essentially rocks, and not just rocks. It's like rocks and water. This is called the bilge, and it's essentially meant to be a weight. Um, it, in order to actually keep the ship stable, um, you have to have a lot of weight placed at the very bottom so that it won't tip over at the top. Like in physics terms, it's creating an overturning moment to ensure that if something's pushing at the top, the weight at the bottom can effectively counteract the weight. So it's rocks and water at the bottom. Um, this is kind of solved nowadays by the fact that modern ships are made with very heavy metal, and all of like the engines and machinery is very heavy, and it's all on the bottom, and that weight acts very similarly to, well, metal is a lot denser than you know a lot denser than wood, so stability isn't as much of an issue nowadays as it used to be. But you know, like I said earlier about the um about the Tsesarevich, it's not particularly stable and like either, just because of how it's designed, an exaggerated tumble home design. So speaking of HMS Victory, so at some point I do actually plan to build the HMS Victory. Um, let's see if I can pull it up. Yeah, so earlier in the um, earlier in the springtime, um, I was a judge at an International Plastic Modeler Society um, sort of convention, and I picked up the model of the HMS Victory. It's a 1 to 100 model. It's about It's about, how do I say, like 3 feet long by 2 feet high, something like that, 2.5 feet high, maybe. It's a very big model. It'll take like a full year to actually make it. Like it would take, a few weekends to actually build it, a few weekends to actually paint it, and then months to actually rig it because I hate rigging this junk. Like there, out of all the aspects of model building, I absolutely hate rigging the most. Um, but that's neither here nor there. I Other than the victory, there's also another um, very very large ship that I might end up building, and that is the come on, come on. That is Le Soleil Royal. So this is also called the Sun King. When in French, Soleil Royal is the Sun King. It's the you know Louis the 14th, the Sun King. This was his royal flagship in the late 1600s. Um, it fought in various coalition wars against France when France was had issues with just about everybody. It's well, it's particularly known for the Williamite wars that almost nobody actually knows about. Um, During the Glorious Revolution, you know, France just decided to try to liberate Ireland from England right after William of Orange was installed as king, and he sent over a giant fleet, and you know it didn't end up succeeding, but it got kind of close. Um, but this is another like this Le Soleil Royal is another one of these like 3 foot long by 2.5 feet tall behemoths that'll take like a whole year to complete. But at the end of it, I do end up with these sort of nice like family heirlooms essentially. But let me see how much time do we have left. So we have about I'd say about 15 more minutes left. So in terms of oh, in terms of future ships after the Tsesarevich, so I'll just bend this down a little bit. So after the Tsesarevich, I end up building uh, her opponent ship, the Mikasa, the Imperial Japanese Navy's you know the flagship of the Japanese Navy during the Russo-Japanese War, just as a sort of complement um, to the Tsesarevich. You know, this is the Russian battleship flagship, as opposed to the Japanese flagship. It might be nice to make, um, or I could just go right into building the Olympia. Who knows though? And who knows if I end up like finding another, like either finding or picking out another little hobby ship of the month. What on earth's going on here? I'll get these to fit sometime. Let's see. H65, H35. Okay, get these out. So, in terms of, I guess, model shipbuilding, you know, even though I'm kind of fumbling it right now, the the best elements of of model shipbuilding is always building the assembly. The assembly is always a whole bunch of fun to actually start gluing together, seeing how all this stuff actually fits. Um, gluing it all together. It's very satisfying. Um, I find that, I guess, like painting, there's a certain, like, it takes a lot of takes a lot of time to set up the painting, and inhaling paint fumes isn't particularly great. Um, but painting, I could do without it. The simpler, the better. Applying like weathering has actually been quite quite fun in my opinion. Like the figuring out what various enamels to use, and you know oil painting. It's it's starting to actually start to grow on me a little bit. Um, okay, there we go. This has three. This little platform over here has is going to end up having three of these sort of smaller guns attached inside of it. Wow. So let's see. One of the things that I absolutely hate about these, about like especially these more modern ships, is that they always have a billion of these life rafts. It takes absolutely forever to build them individually. And let's see, D11, right, takes forever. What was I saying? Oh, yeah, I particularly like assembly. Anyone who's gone into like Warhammer 40k knows what's like to get a brand new kit. Buying is always the most fun, and then assembling is also a whole lot of fun. And then you prime it, and then you start painting, and then you keep painting until I guess you lose interest after a little while. You put it down, and yeah, you keep painting. You put it down, and then next thing you know, it's just another one of these little paperweights on your shelf, until like soaking up space until you actually finish putting the thing together. Um, let's see. And I've heard from quite a few sort of plastic model guys, the old timers from these various society events, that you know the wives treat it like an annoyance, and they treat it like a sort of addiction that you manage. Um, and I think it's kind of true. Um, plastic model, like these types of plastic models, are not nearly as expensive as like Warhammer miniatures. It's comparable, and you know, my wife is actually quite upset by how much space is being taken up in the closet by all of the unfinished kits. But with the help of this show, we'll end up getting all the models done anyways. Okay, so Mr. Felix asks where the riptide is. So I'll have to actually pull this out. So I don't actually have a riptide. Um, so the closest I have to a riptide is So the closest I have is, I'm trying to pull it out. The closest I have is this here broadside. It's not it's not even it's primed, but I haven't even, you know, I haven't even like painted the base coats of colors yet. Um, Unfortunately, it's just one of the, like, I have several kill teams, um, or several little squads of Tau guys. You know, I have the tank. I have a bunch of little mechs. Um, Unfortunately, when I first got into Warhammer 40k, I thought, hey, these like these little alien guys look kind of cool, and I didn't know anything about the lore. And unfortunately, I chose Tau because, you know, the mechs look kind of cool. I didn't know anything about him. I didn't know their reputation, and, you know, a couple $100 worth of miniatures later, you know, yeah, it's kind of cool to have like the Daka, um, you know, the gun, like shoot them from a distance kind of team. But uh, there's a certain reputation of Tau players for being weebs, you know, not undeserved. You know, um, when Warhammer was initially trying to break into the Japanese market, they said, "Hey, why not make a sort of mecha, you know, Japanesey like brand or faction fabricated sort of out of the ether?" So you end up with, you know, a certain amount of playing pretend that the Tau are actually this, you know, up and coming potential behemoth, even though, you know, they could easily get stomped and by any of the other factions. So, like this year broadside costs just about as much. This one small broadside costs just about as much as this Trumpeter kit, and it's not even close. Like the Warhammer kits cost just about as much as gold today, and, you know, in terms of hobbies, yeah, there are a whole lot more old folks that are into model ship building, but it's a little bit less of a financial drain. And not gonna lie, I feel like just about most other guys, you know, I like no one actually plays the tabletop game for a few different reasons, right? There are the people who have a tendency to rules lawyer and either rules lawyer, or they build armies specifically for like playing the meta, and that sort of kills any sort of, I guess, secondary um, concerns you might have with building an army. Like, it's like you have to love you have to love the the orcs players who never do great in the meta, but their whole ethos, you know, let's just roll a ton of dice, let's gamble hard, and probably gonna lose, but we're gonna have a good time playing it. And I figure that's probably the best mentality that will keep you going in the long run and saves you a bunch of money. Um, I've never particularly liked the orcs aesthetic in 40k, and it just takes, like, I know I'm being lazy with my Tau not painting them, but it genuinely does take forever to paint an orc army just because of how many units there are, like both how many units there are and how like strange and colorful and detailed everything is. Like yeah, I'm sure like one day, like there have been all sorts of chats to have something of an OGC like wargaming tournament at some point. Although who knows when or if that'll ever happen IRL. Um, like a while ago, I decided to invest in a pike and shot army for Warlord games. Pike and shot, it's sort of 16th and 17th century warfare with you know pike spears and early guns, and it's something like a rock paper scissors, right? Where pike beats cavalry, cavalry beats muskets, muskets beats pike. Uh, it's a very underappreciated and you know era of history. However, uh, there are very few historical war game players, and you know just building an army for the vibe isn't particularly conducive to playing it for a very very long time. You know, hobbies kind of come and go, but this particular hobby of building model ships is actually sticking around over the years. Um, so like Felix asks, 3D printing ships. So 3D printing ships is actually the future of scale modeling and I guess modeling in general. But the issue is that it also sucks out a lot of the fun. Um, so when it comes to building model ships, um, there are essentially two sort of schools of thought when it comes to like the overall style for these kits. Actually, there are three. So first is DIY, build everything yourself. You know, get like some foam that you cut out, and you know make the ship by yourself out of like metal or wood or whatever. Um, that takes a significant amount of skill and machinery and whatever. And then there are like these little model kits, of course. And there are two types of sort of two sides of the spectrum. So there are kits like Trumpeter over here. Let's see. Yeah, so there are kits over here like Trumpeter who have like this one has like over 400 plastic pieces and then 200 photo etch brass pieces, and everything is extremely detailed. Um, it's up very high on the difficulty curve. Um, and on the other hand, you have um, you know the opposite side of the spectrum where you have very few parts and generally they're less detailed. Brands like Revell and Tamiya are kind of the exemplars of this. Like Revell is kind of like Warhammer tier parts. They're usually kind of well. This is actually kind of a diss on Warhammer because of how not particularly detailed a lot of their models are compared to like these tiny model ships. Um, but yeah, there's that spectrum. In 3D models, right now there's a sort of the bootleg 3D model ship market isn't really it's not it's not quite all there yet. Um, there have been like the very first like model ships um, coming out of like the 3D printed model ship market are these bootlegs of World of Warships models, and they're not particularly good. They're not particularly good. Usually, they're kind of expensive. They're more expensive than like these model kits that give you the gratification of building them yourself. So, you know, as of now, I'm not really interested in 3D printing 3D printed model ships. It's just the market's just or the tech just isn't there, and the price point isn't there yet. And I have a feeling, just like why aren't there? Why don't people regularly use like 3D printed, um, alternative Warhammer 40K models? Part of the reason is just you're buying for the brand already. Um, like a lot of these model ships um, from 3D printer companies. Um, I believe what's his name? Boxman Builds actually did build like a 3D printed ship once. It was like an old like Soviet. Um, I need to track this down. But there's an old well, Boxman Builds is this uh it's like a plastic model ship, channel, and the kit they got for this Soviet era battleship was like the entirety of the hull was already built, and all of the turrets were already built, and most of there are only a few parts of the actual superstructure up top. So what do you actually get to build? Where's the enjoyment in putting together the superstructure? Even if it's kind of a pain in the ass to build, it's like the enjoyment of seeing something actually being put together that is half of the appeal of this thing. So yeah. So I think we're actually coming to the end of the show. Um, so all things considered, I think I actually did get I don't know, a little bit of work done today. I'm probably going to keep on working the um, into the Old Glory Club Pony Express. Um, Old Glory Club Pony Radio Express show. Go tune into them as soon as they get started. Um, it should be quite a show tonight. Um, you know, check out the Oh, you guys better have a good time at the Old Glory Club. Was it the East Coast Forum for Saturday and Sunday, or Saturday? Yeah, it's just Saturday. It should be a pretty good time out there. I don't think I have too many other comments to deal with. Um, yeah, so let me see. No other like real comments other than just ship autism increasing. I'm always appreciative of other guys that have the same little autistic fixations as I do. Just to know that you're not the only other person out there. And if you guys have any suggestions for future guests, for future topics, that I can host on my channel, please comment. Like either comment in the comments, live comments now, or leave comments in the description, because I'm always interested in seeing what people actually like hearing me talk about, because I know only some people enjoy my rambling. I had a blast researching for topics like um, for the Sax and the Quiet Revolution, or Rhodesia and Will Tanner, or looking into the whaling industry with Christopher Sandbach. I absolutely love getting into the weeds for a few of these topics. Um, and although I think I could have done I could have streamlined the Hornblower series mini series review just a little bit more, but I could have streamlined the Hornblower series a little bit more. Although personally, just getting into each little episode, I feel did the series a little bit more of a service, because each episode really was, it needed its own individual, like time in the sun, right? Because there were varying levels of quality throughout that show, and it needed a little bit of I guess, um, needed a little bit of explanation. So with regards to doy boats and river travel, so I actually got into this. Well, like I said earlier in the stream, I actually did cover the golden age of the keel boat, which was early 1800s to 1830s ish. You know, after New Orleans opened up, between then and the invention of efficient steamboats to replace riverboats, it's is actually a very, very short period, the time when there are Mike Finks of the world running around. But yeah, I could cover that in the future. I do see that that Old Glory Club is streaming now, so I'll see you guys on Saturday. I'm hosting a call-in show for anyone who wants to join from the comments, from Twitter, from YouTube, from Telegram, to join in. Um, I'll see you guys on Saturday at 11 a.m. EST, and ahoy everybody, and don't drink too much rum. Enjoying yourselves at the East Coast Forum. Thank you guys.